You've probably heard sermons or Bible studies before about eternal rewards. You've probably heard sermons or Bible studies before about the judgment seat of Christ. But have you ever thought specifically about what rewards you're going to gain for the Millennial Kingdom? That 1,000-year period where Christ is going to reign on planet Earth physically after the tribulation, after the second coming of Christ. Now, this is not talking about heaven, okay? This is not talking about the eternal state. Heaven's going to go on forever. But the Millennial Kingdom, that's going to be its own unique time period. That's what we've been studying lately here on the podcast. And what I'm finding is that a lot of the verses that we apply to our future in heaven, they might more accurately apply to this Millennial Kingdom time frame. Some of these verses that I'm going to talk about tonight are those ones focused on rewards. So you've probably heard about eternal rewards before, but I want us to specifically look at tonight the Millennial Kingdom rewards. And probably what you'd most like to know about them is what you can do to earn them. Well, you're going to find that out today on the Cross References podcast. Welcome to the Book of Ezekiel, a cross-references Bible study, where we learn how every small piece of the Bible tells one big story and how they all connect to the cross and Christ. My name is Luke Taylor, and we're not actually going to be in the Book of Ezekiel on this specific lesson. We're going to be talking about something that's come up a lot lately in this section of Ezekiel, and that is this concept of our heavenly rewards, what might be usually called our eternal rewards, but I'm going to speak about them specifically today as the Millennial Kingdom rewards. And so in this section of Ezekiel that we're in, we're talking about the Millennial Kingdom, which is that 1,000-year reign of Christ. And what I really want to focus on right here today is what you are going to be doing in that kingdom. And so the last time we got together and talked about this, it was actually 2 weeks ago. I took the live stream off last Sunday night because there was this little sporting event that was on TV called the Super Bowl, and I didn't want to compete with the Super Bowl. I was at our church small group. They wanted to have a Super Bowl get together. So I was with my church small group anyway that night. But I tell you what, if you watched that game, you know it was not the most interesting game in the world. I probably could have competed with the Super Bowl that night. Probably should have done a live stream. But anyway, we're here now. And so again, we're in this section of Ezekiel talking about what you are going to be doing during the Millennial Kingdom time period, that time frame. And a lot of what we talked about 2 weeks ago related to this concept of eternal rewards. And so I'm going to be talking about that some more tonight, but I want to talk about what can we do to gain those rewards. A few weeks ago, we were looking at how Ezekiel, he saw who I believe was King David. He saw King David and the Levites and the sons of Zadok and what they would be doing during the millennium. And if you remember, the Levites had not done such a great job in the Old Testament of maintaining the spiritual purity of Israel. And so in the Millennial Kingdom time frame, they have been downgraded in their service. They've been relegated to basically being maintenance men, being the janitors of Christ's temple that's going to be in Jerusalem during the millennial reign of Christ. They've got a downgrade in their service. But meanwhile, there were these priests who had really showed themselves to be a cut above the rest, exemplary. And so they were given a greater service. They had proved faithful in the Old Testament times. So they were given enhanced service in the Millennial Kingdom times. And so all of this is really going to relate to what is going to be our main idea today. What you do today matters forever, okay? Because the things that we do while we are spending the limited time that we have here on planet Earth, they are written down, just like what the Levites did in the Old Testament was written down in God's Word. He's keeping a record of what you and I are doing. And whenever we get to the next stage, which is going to be after our time here on earth, we are going to be given a judgment based on how well we did on this earth, and that is going to reflect what rewards we receive. We could say in heaven or in eternity, but again, specifically tonight, we're going to look at those Millennial Kingdom rewards. And so it all goes back to this idea, what you do today matters forever. And so that's why we really got to take our actions seriously and make sure that we're doing the best we can in service for our Lord. We're going to look at a lot of verses today. I spent a chunk of the afternoon loading up a bunch of verses here into the system so that, because I want to read a lot of verses and I want you to be able to read them along with me. And so to start off, let's look here at this one in Romans 14. It says, "But why do you judge your brother? Or why do you show contempt for your brother? For we shall all stand before the judgment seat of Christ. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us shall give account of himself to God." I said you can see the verses. If you're listening in the audio form on podcast, then you don't get to see them. But I do put a link in the show notes of the episode so that you can go back and see the live stream. If you're not in a position where you can watch something, you're free to listen and just hear the verses and all that. But if you'd like a more visual aid to help you out with this, you're welcome to click on that link in the show notes. It'll take you to tonight's, or it'll be last night's tomorrow, but it'll take you to that live stream and you'll be able to watch. Because remember, this whole thing started as an audio-only podcast, which is available anywhere you get your podcasts, the Book of Ezekiel, a cross-references Bible study. So you can listen in audio form, but I'm trying something a little bit new here in 2025 and putting these video Bible studies out. Okay, anyway, sorry to interrupt there in the middle of, I just read Romans 14, verses 10 through 12, and it talks right there about the judgment seat of Christ. It's telling us in Romans 14, hey, you don't have to get all in each other's business and judging each other. Kind of it's talking about items that are questionable in Romans 14, things where you don't know if they're a sin or not. And so it's like, sometimes we do things and we're not really sure if they're a sin, or some other Christian's doing something and we think it looks a little sketchy and we're not sure if it's such a good idea. And Romans 14 says, then let them worry about themselves and you worry about yourself. And he's saying here in verses 10 through 12, we're all going to stand before the judgment seat of Christ. So you don't have to stand in judgment over them, and you're not going to be standing in their place when Christ judges them. You're going to be judged for your own actions. So make sure that you are doing what you're supposed to be doing. We are all going to give account of ourselves to God. And then this idea also comes up in 2 Corinthians chapter 5, verses 8 through 10. We are confident, yes, well pleased rather, to be absent from the body and to be present with the Lord. I just started it there because I love that verse so much. I just love that idea. As soon as we're absent from our bodies, we are present with the Lord. Verse 9, therefore we make it our aim, whether present or absent, to be well-pleasing to him. For we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ, that each one may receive the things done in the body according to what he has done, whether good or bad. And so it says we are going to appear before Jesus and give an account of what we did with our time on this earth. And we're going to receive rewards or even perhaps lose rewards based on how we behaved. Now, I want to look at verse 10 right there. It says, we must all appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Let me talk about something right there. Does the word all mean all? Does it mean all people everywhere who've ever lived? Well, actually, no. When it says all right there, it's talking about all believers. So all believers are going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ. Unbelievers are going to face a different judgment, and that's called the Great White Throne Judgment. It comes up at the end of Revelation chapter 20, which is the chapter about the millennium. After the millennium's over, there's going to be this moment called the Great White Throne Judgment, and that is a judgment for unbelievers where they're all going to be judged for their works and condemned to greater degrees of suffering in hell. But I know that's a very dark thought, but I'm not going to go down that road tonight. But unbelievers are judged for their acts too, their works, and the worse of an unbeliever that they were, the more sinful things that they did, they'll be consigned to a worse degree of punishment in the afterlife. Kind of the opposite is true for Christians, that we are going to go to heaven, we are believers, but we're going to be judged for how many rewards we receive, how good it's going to be for us in heaven. And so we believers, we are all going to appear before the judgment seat of Christ to receive the things done in the body according to what we have done. And so the judgment seat of Christ, this is a judgment for Christians. Now, some people get a little uncomfortable with that word judgment because they say, wait a minute, I'm not going to be judged because all my sins were placed on Jesus at the cross. And so we think, why do I have to go and give an account of myself to God? Like, what's the point of that if my sins have all been forgiven? Is God even going to know the bad things that I've done? And so that's a really good question, and we've got to make a distinction right here. You're not going to, let me start by saying this. One, you will not be judged for anything that you did before you became a Christian. Because once you got saved, all of your record of sins, that was all wiped away, completely expunged. It's like God doesn't even know what you did. Okay? It's all been totally wiped away. What you're going to be judged for is what kind of life that you lived after you became a Christian. All right? It is not a judgment of whether you're going to go to heaven or not, because that was already determined whenever you became a Christian. Now you're going to go to heaven. So it's not a judgment where you get to the judgment seat of Christ and you just, you flunked out so bad that God just takes away your salvation. It's not that kind of judgment. That's not what's going to happen, okay? And we'll talk about that at the end of today's lesson some more. You're not going to flunk out and be downgraded to hell or something like that. This is a judgment of rewards and what rewards you're going to be given for the afterlife. So just remember that as we're going through this, that what you do today matters for forever. So again, I'm going to recap a little bit of what we discussed last time. We looked at Zechariah chapter 3, verse 7, where it was talking about what kind of rewards that we're going to receive whenever we get to that next stage. And it said, if you will walk in my ways, and if you will keep my command, then you shall also judge my house, and likewise have charge of my courts. I will give you places to walk among those who stand here. So we talked about the 3 different types of rewards that we're going to receive, and there could be more than these 3. There probably are. But these are just 3 that Zechariah chapter 3 mentions. He says, a judge of my house, that means a high position in what's actually the Millennial Kingdom. Charge of my courts, which means a high degree of service, a great work to do in that kingdom, and a place among those standing here, which means you'll be allowed to be closer to God in our dwelling place where we're going to dwell in the Millennial Kingdom, and I'm sure probably in the new heavens and the new earth in our eternity as well. But I kind of always looked at this as just our eternal rewards, and eternity is just so hard to wrap your mind around. It's all just kind of fuzzy. It's like, man, eternity going on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, and new heavens, new earth, new Jerusalem. What's it all going to be like? And we only get a couple chapters on it there in the Bible. So as I've been going through some of these verses on the Millennial Kingdom over the past few months now, I guess, I wonder if a lot of these things that we've been told are about heaven are actually really more about that Millennial Kingdom time frame. It seems the Bible talks more about that Millennial Kingdom time frame, and heaven is kind of more, when I say heaven, I mean eternity, like the stage after the millennium. That's actually where it gets really fuzzy. It's kind of hard to know exactly what it's going to be like. We get a couple chapters there in Revelation, but a lot of the other stuff that the Bible talks about is really focused on this kingdom of Christ. And so right here, we will be given a greater, allowed to be closer to God, even more so in that millennial kingdom based on how we behave right now in the time that we have on earth. And an example of that is the sons of Zadok that we looked at a few weeks ago. The sons of Zadok got to minister right up into the holiest place of that new temple that's being built. This was in Ezekiel 44. Like the Levites who had been kind of downgraded in their service, they had to stay on the outer edges of the temple. They couldn't go into the holiest spot and offer sacrifices like they got to in the Old Testament. Now they've been pushed a little bit more to the outside, but the sons of Zadok, because they had done so good, they got to worship and do service in the temple even closer to God than everyone else. And so so what could that look like in the millennium for you and me when we talk about being closer to God? I'm not going to make any claims of specifics, but I just think it means we will maybe report more directly to Jesus based on the service that we did with the time that we had here on this earth. So we're all going to be given work to do in that kingdom. Judge of my house, charge of my courts, a place among those standing here. Now, hey, better to be a janitor in the house of God than to burn in hell for all eternity, right? Okay, no, yeah, considering the alternative, no one's going to be like miserable if they're a janitor, right? But don't you just want to be ambitious for Jesus? Like, don't you just want to accomplish as much as you can with the time that we have right now? Don't you want to grab up as many of those rewards as you can get? Like, I think that's the attitude that we got to have, okay? It's not that we're going to look down on those who have lesser service, but I'm just saying for you and me, like, don't we just want to go get all that we can when it comes to those millennial kingdom rewards? Okay, so, and by the way, it's okay to be ambitious for him. It's okay to like go after those things because God's the one who put him out there. Jesus is the one who told us so much about them. He's, like, what do they call it? Dangling that carrot. He's the one dangling that carrot, wanting us to go for those things. So it's okay to be ambitious for these eternal rewards or Millennial Kingdom rewards. They were God's idea. He wouldn't have told us about them if he didn't want us to get excited about them, if he didn't want to entice us with them. These were his idea. Matthew chapter 6, I don't have the verses on the screen, verses 19 through 21, they say, do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth and rust destroy and where thieves break in and steal, but lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven where neither moth nor rust destroys and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. So now that said heaven right there. So I know that's referring to those heavenly rewards, maybe more in the eternal nature. But I'm just saying, I'm making the point here, he wants us thinking about those things. That's what he wants us to have our mind on, not the things of this earth, but to have that eternal perspective. Like that C.S. Lewis quote, I think I'm using this for the third week in a row, but it just goes so well with this. He said, if you would read history, you will find that the Christians who did the most for the present world were precisely those who thought most of the next. It is since Christians have largely ceased to think of the other world that they have become so ineffective in this. So we're going to look at several verses here tonight. And as we're going through these verses, I just want you to think about whether they sound like they're more for the millennial kingdom or whether it's talking about the eternal state. And what I think you'll find along with me is that I think these are really talking about that millennial kingdom. We'll start here with Revelation 20, verse 6, just to kind of set the stage here. This is, again, talking about the millennium. And Jesus wrote here, blessed, or John wrote, but this is the words of Jesus here. Blessed and holy is the one who shares in the first resurrection. Over such the second death has no power, but they will be priests of God and of Christ, and they will reign with him for 1,000 years. We are going to reign on this earth with Christ. I mean, that's that's hard to even wrap your mind around, right? But Christ is going to be the king. He's going to be the head honcho in that millennium, much more so than he is today, because right now he rules from heaven, and people have more freedom to rebel against Christ if they want to. But that will not be the case in the millennial kingdom. He's going to have control of the whole world. We'll talk more about this in a couple weeks, but I mean, it's where if you don't listen to him and do what he says, he can turn the rain off. Okay, so that's people will be made to obey Jesus, and it's going to be a wonderful world in the millennial kingdom. And who's going to help him to keep this place running? You and I. Okay, that's what we who are the Old Testament saints, the Christians of the church today, those who get saved in the tribulation, all of those saints are going to come back with Christ and rule and reign with him in this millennial kingdom. And this is all over the Bible, guys. It's like I never really stopped and thought about some of these verses, but it says this all over the word. 2 Timothy 2, verses 11 through 13. The saying is trustworthy. For if we have died with him, we will also live with him. If we endure, we will also reign with him. If we deny him, he also will deny us. If we are faithless, he remains faithful, for he cannot deny himself. You know, there's a beautiful little hymnal right there in the book of 2 Timothy. And I just kind of read through it. I'm like, oh, that's nice. You know, nice little flowery language. But it says right there, we will also reign with him. You know, some of these verses I just never really stopped and thought about before. It's all over the Bible. We're going to reign with Christ. Another one to look at today is Revelation 2:26. Jesus said, the one who conquers and who keeps my words until the end, to him I will give authority over the nations. In the millennial kingdom, there's going to be various nations on the earth. We're going to talk in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about the society and governance of that millennial kingdom. But that verse says that some of us are going to be placed in positions of authority, literally over nations. Okay? Because we are all in this authority structure with Jesus at the top, but he is using us to work for him and keeping the world running during that time period. So when we talk about our reign, like what kind of reign are we going to have? Are we going to be ruling and reigning over each other? Well, not necessarily. We're going to be ruling over the human citizens of planet Earth, okay? We who have earned it are going to have administrative roles in keeping up with the citizens of planet Earth. Now, there's going to be a chain of command, okay? You might be my boss, or I might be your boss, but we're not ruling over each other. What we're doing is we're helping Jesus to rule the world, because the world population is going to really flourish, and there's going to be lots of babies born and lots of people. They're going to live a long time, longer lifespan. So the world's going to fill up with people. We are going to be administrators helping Jesus during that time. Another verse here about how we're going to reign is Daniel 7:27, where it says, "And the kingdom and the dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people of the saints of the Most High. His kingdom shall be an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him." And then 1 Corinthians 6:1-2. It reads, "When one of you has a grievance against another, does he dare go to law before the unrighteous instead of the saints? Or do you not know that the saints will judge the world? And if the world is to be judged by you, are you incompetent to try trivial cases?" Now, this one's really interesting right here, guys. Paul's like, why can't you guys in church just deal with your own problems? You know, don't you know that the things that you are doing in the world, these are practicing for rule in the millennial kingdom? Now, just think about that for a minute. Like, Paul is he's getting after the Corinthians, you don't need to be going to human courts, to the local judge and having him work out your issues. You should be able to settle these things amongst yourselves, because what you're doing on this world right now, this is practice for what we're going to be doing in that 1,000-year kingdom. Okay, so now think about that. Do any churches have this attitude? Most churches probably don't try to settle the disputes this way. But do any churches have this attitude that we are practicing for what we're going to be doing for that 1,000-year reign of Christ? That what we're doing right now is going to actually apply later. You know, Paul makes a direct link right here between what you're learning today and what you're going to be doing in that 1,000-year kingdom. Okay, does it sound to you like Paul is saying, you know, all this world, this system, it's all just going to burn up. It really doesn't matter what we do here. You know, don't worry about the 1,000-year reign. We'll get there when we get there, and we'll figure it out when we get there. It's okay if you don't know what to do. Does it sound like that's his attitude? No, it's like he's saying, hey, the stuff that you're doing right now, this is sowing seeds. This is getting you ready for what you're going to be doing for 1,000 years. So be thinking about that. Be thinking about, you know, what you're going to be doing during that time period, and apply the lessons that you're learning here today to that time period. I don't know if anyone ever thinks that way about what we're doing. You know, it's like, okay, no, I'm going to, you know, watch another episode of Jeopardy today and then Wheel of Fortune. And we just never think about how what we're doing with our time, this is preparation for work that we're going to be doing for 1,000 years. So we want to be really good at it. And if you're like, hey, I want a really high administrative position in the millennial kingdom of Jesus. Well, if you want that, then you better be preparing yourself for it, because that's probably who he's going to give it to, is those people who have been preparing themselves, and so earning those rewards. The parable of the 10 minas, this is one of those parables Jesus told, where there was a ruler and he gave out this to one servant and this to another servant and this to another servant. And he said, go out and be productive with it. And, you know, and they came back and they're like, hey, I turned that 5 into 10. And so let me read a little bit of that one here. I'm trying to condense a lot of it just for the sake of time. Luke 19:16 and 17. The first came before him saying, Lord, your mina has made 10 minas more. And he said to him, well done, good servant. Because you have been faithful in a very little, you shall have authority over 10 cities. And the second came, saying, Lord, your mina has made 5 minas. And he said to him, you are to be over 5 cities. Now, to me, that sounds like it's talking about the millennium. It could apply to heaven. I'm sure heaven has a civilizational aspect to it as well. The eternal state, the new heavens and new earth, it could be applying to that. But I really think it's applying directly to that millennial kingdom Jesus is going to be in charge of. He's the one who's going to say, hey, Luke, hey, you know, whatever your name, fill in the blank for you. You did so good with your time on this earth. Like, you took what I gave you and you turned it into this. You've been faithful in a little bit here in this 70 or 80 years that you spent on earth right now. I'm going to make you over a lot when we get to the next stage, when we get to the millennial kingdom. I'm going to give you a lot of responsibility because you did so well with what you were given here. You learned so many lessons with what you were given here. You're ready for the millennial kingdom. That's what he's going to be doing right here. There's a similar parable in Matthew 24 and the parable of the talents. And Matthew 24:20 reads, and he who had actually, let me see if I have this. Nope, not that one. I'm looking for if I have the verses here. Yeah, I got the verses right there on the screen. Matthew 25:20. And he who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 talents more, saying, Master, you delivered to me 5 talents. Here I have made 5 talents more. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master. And again, I always thought about this as applying to heaven, but I really think it's more directly about that millennial kingdom time period. So again, the eternal state, what I keep calling heaven, the eternal state is so much fuzzier compared to all that we know about the millennial time frame. That the Bible has so much more to say about this 1,000 years. I think a lot of the eternal state is being left up to a surprise. We're given some details, okay? I'm not saying it's a blank slate, but it's a lot less detail than what we're given about the 1,000 years. Matthew 19:29. And I'm having trouble finding it because there's a lot of verses from Matthew tonight. So let me find, here it is, Matthew 19:29. Okay. And everyone who has left houses or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for my name's sake shall receive 100-fold and inherit eternal life. The things that we sacrifice right now with the time that we're, the 70 or 80 year time frame that you're alive on this planet, but anything that we would sacrifice to God right now in service of his kingdom, Jesus is like, you're going to get something 100 times better later on. So these are the rewards he wants us to think about. Whenever you have to give something up for God, it could be a few hours of your time. It could be $10,000. Whatever it is that you give up for God, he's like, hey, don't worry about what you lost right there, because you're going to get something 100 times better in the next stage. Literally 100-fold. That's a pretty good promise right there. That's a pretty good return on your investment, right? The ROI. That's a pretty good ROI right there. If you're going to get something 100 times better. I read that, I'm like, why do I even worry about a few hours of my time or $10,000? I've never given $10,000 to something, but why do we even worry about something like that whenever we get 100-fold ROI on it? So I don't always know specifics about what eternal rewards are going to be. We're kind of given categorical ideas of it, but not the specifics, because I think it's going to be different for each person based on what their role is. But whatever they are, they're going to be worth it. They're going to be worth it. Okay? So again, don't feel bad about being ambitious for these things, because this was God's idea. I remember one time I was on a missions trip in South Dakota. My church, when I was a teenager, we went up to South Dakota, and my whole family went on this missions trip, and we all went around and were doing different service projects in this community, helping people who were very much in poverty. And it was just kind of a dark place, like a lot of drug use and suicide, and just a very spiritually dark place. And so anyway, we were doing some work for the people of the community. And I remember like being a teenager and just being kind of like, wanting to I just wanted to come back with a story or something. I'm like, send me to the toughest spot, the roughest house. And the house we went to, we installed a toilet for them. They literally did not even have a toilet in their house. They were using a hole in the floor or something. I mean, it was not good. I don't know if I should have gone to that house, but I just really wanted to see, I just wanted to get into the I don't know what I wanted to do as a dumb teenager, but I was just like, hey, stick me in the grossest spot. So anyway, what I was going to say is the group that I was with, I remember one of the people in our group was talking about how he's like, well, I'm not even really doing it for these people. He's like, I'm doing this so I can get eternal rewards. And I didn't like it whenever I heard him say that, because I thought, well, hey, aren't we supposed to, it's not supposed to be about ourselves. Like, we're not supposed to just be doing stuff to get rewarded. Like we should do it because it's the right thing. This is how my teenager brain was thinking about it. But over time, as I've reflected on that statement, I think he was right. We should be ambitious going after those eternal rewards. It's okay to do things. Again, we still want to love people and care about other people. We shouldn't make it all about us. But I'm just saying it's okay to have this attitude of like, you know what? I'm going to do this because God said I'm going to be rewarded for it. That is he wouldn't put that carrot out there dangling it in front of us if he didn't want us to go for it. It was God's idea. If he didn't like us knowing about the rewards, he wouldn't have told us so much about them. He talks about them a lot. So let's talk about how we earn some of these rewards. And the first one, and this is kind of the most obvious point, but our good deeds. Our good deeds, that's a pretty basic way to say, yeah, we're going to earn rewards for our good deeds. And that means following what the Bible says, doing what the Bible says to do, not doing what the Bible doesn't say to do. So yeah, that is the stuff that's going to earn you rewards in heaven. We'll talk more about some of those specific things in a minute. Another thing that will help you earn rewards is, let me look here, your work, okay? The job that you do, your output in this world. Now, some of you might be thinking, well, I don't really, I don't work for a church. I work for Walmart, or I work for a factory, and, am I even going to get rewarded for any of that? Yes, you will. You'll be rewarded based on how hard of a worker that you were. Okay, Jesus might, maybe you don't want to work in a factory for 1,000 years, but hey, he might need some factories in the Millennial Kingdom to construct whatever we're building at that time. And I think it's going to be a much more even technologically advanced civilization beyond what we have right now, because the world's just going to flourish and boom. But he might have some factories to put you in charge of. So he's like, hey, learn what you need to learn with the time that you're here, or whatever job that you do. You work at a newspaper. You work at, just whatever it is that you do. You work in a meat locker, but do your best with it. Don't be lazy. Work hard for your boss and just dedicate yourself as an employee. If we look at Daniel in the Bible, Daniel had a secular job, and yet Daniel excelled at it. He was one of the best men in the Bible, and he excelled so much at what he did, he was elevated to the number 2 position in the kingdom of Babylon. Number 2 or number 3, he got promoted heavily at that time. Okay, and that was a secular job, but he gave it all his heart, and he was rewarded for it on earth, and I'm sure in heaven as well. Just whatever your job is, do the very best you can at it. It doesn't matter. Job he didn't run a nonprofit. He wasn't a pastor. He was like a farmer or something. He had a ranch. He was a landowner, and he had all this property and all these animals and servants, people who worked for him. Okay, this was a businessman. But he was super blessed by God and super highly thought of by God, okay? Even though he was very rich. We're kind of hard on the wealthy sometimes. Oh, all wealthy people, the billionaires are all greedy. Abraham was probably the richest man in the world at the time that he was doing his stories in the Bible. He had all these servants who worked for him. It doesn't matter if you don't need to be a pastor to earn a bunch of heavenly rewards or Millennial Kingdom rewards, okay? Whatever your job is, just do it well. Just excel at whatever you do. And God's going to give you something even better later on, okay? And if you don't excel at what you do, he might give you something worse to do in the 1,000 years. So do your best. Matthew 10:42, and here it is. And whoever gives one of these little ones even a cup of cold water because he is a disciple, truly I say to you, he will by no means lose his reward. This is reminding me to take a drink because my throat's getting a little sore. One thing about doing a live stream is if you got to stop and take a drink. When I'm just recording an audio episode of the podcast, I could edit this part out. But since it's live, the live is life, right? I stop and take a drink. We just have to keep it in. So anyway, the third thing I want you to remember about our heavenly kingdom, getting my words mixed up, Millennial Kingdom rewards is that you're going to be rewarded for everything that you do, no matter how big it is, no matter how small it is. Like I said, there's a record being kept in heaven. There's a book being kept in heaven. And no matter how small of a thing that you did, even a cup of cold water is going to be rewarded in the next world. So God is keeping track. He is keeping track of what we're up to. And so even something that just seems small and you're like, well, this is such a small thing. I don't think God's going to even take notice of it. I'm not going to get to the judgment seat of Christ and he gives me a reward for every cup of water I handed out. If you did it in his name, you did it with good intentions, good motivations and all that, you can be rewarded for that. So he's keeping, hopefully there's a long list. Hopefully you've done much bigger things than give someone a cup of water. We're going to be rewarded for the spiritual practices that we did. And these include things like prayer, reading our Bible, fasting, going to church. Okay, these are things that, you might think that's just the baseline stuff. That's the minimum requirement is that we're supposed to pray. But Jesus actually said, I'm going to reward you for stopping in your day and taking time to pray. He says in Matthew 6, verses 5 and 6, and when you pray, you must not be like the hypocrites, for they love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. And we're going to talk more about what that means next week. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door and pray to your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Man, that makes me excited right there, guys. Things like prayer, things like reading our Bible, those spiritual disciplines, those will gain rewards for you. As long as you're doing them for the right reasons, okay? If you do them for the wrong reasons, you won't be rewarded for it, okay? And again, we'll talk about that next week. We're going to spend another week on this Millennial Kingdom Rewards series, but there's things you can do to lose rewards, and then we'll be more focused on the negative side of that next time. But anyway, if you do it, even those daily spiritual practices of prayer, reading your Bible, here's another one, Matthew 6, 16 through 18. And when you fast, do not look gloomy like the hypocrites, for they disfigure their faces, that their fasting may be seen by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. But when you fast, anoint your head and wash your face, that your fasting may not be seen by others, but by your Father who is in secret, and your Father who sees in secret will reward you. You'll be rewarded for fasting. I don't think of fasting as something I do for a reward. I don't think of prayer as something I do for a reward. I think of it as something I do because I want to be close to God and I want to be in tune with the Spirit so I can go do other things that might earn rewards. But I don't think about the prayer itself being something that earns a reward. Jesus said it in the Sermon on the Mount. Go read the Sermon on the Mount sometime this week. It says a lot about those rewards that we are going to receive. So there's a lot of it in there about that. So the prayer, the fasting, the spiritual disciplines that we do, those things will gain rewards whenever we do them right. And what we do today matters for forever. And so we're going to wind it down in just a few minutes here. I'll mention a couple things about the future here. So I've started a newsletter if you'd like to keep up with me. I've got a lot going on in my life right now, and I'll tell you some more about it next week. But you'll hear about it a little sooner probably if you sign up for my newsletter. So I will put a link in the show notes. I don't know if I have it there right now, but I'll get a link in the show notes where if you'd like to sign up for the newsletter and just keep up with me, it's actually, the newsletter is assigned to my other podcast, which is called Weird Stuff in the Bible. And so if you'd like to get that newsletter from me, it's the Weird Stuff in the Bible newsletter, but it'll help you keep up with kind of the direction of this ministry and stuff like that. And then if you do want to get in touch with me directly, my email is crossreferencespodcast@gmail.com. And so, hey, thank you for listening. If you're not subscribed, make sure you're subscribed because you'll get next week's episode. Next week is going to be about losing our Millennial Kingdom rewards. We talked this week about what we can do to gain them, but we're going to talk next time about what we could do to lose them. And so you got a little taste of that just a minute ago in the verses that we read. But again, how can we gain these rewards? Our good deeds, following the Bible, doing good at your work, anything that you do, no matter how big or small, following spiritual practices, spiritual disciplines. Those are 5 things right there we covered today that are going to earn you rewards for the Millennial Kingdom and for all eternity, all eternity as well. Let's talk a little bit about the process by which Jesus is going to judge those things. So it says in 1 Corinthians chapter 3, verses 11 through 15, and I think I have the verses here I can throw up on the screen. Yep, okay. So it says here, Paul writes, "For no other foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. Okay, let me just pause there for a minute. So remember what I told you before, that when you get to the judgment seat of Christ, this is not a judgment of where if you have just done such a bad job of being a Christian, like he's like, okay, that's it. You lost your salvation. You're going to go to hell. Like I just can't even let you into heaven because you did such a poor job. Okay. Thankfully, he's not going to do that. Whether you're saved comes down to whether you believe the gospel. Salvation is not of works. You cannot be saved based on how good of a job you did before or after you accepted Jesus, okay? So salvation is not something that's done of works, all right? The judgment seat of Christ is a judgment of works, but it's a judgment of rewards, okay? So salvation's not of works, but rewards are of works. So we can't say, oh, well, Jesus died for my sins, so I just get all the rewards. It doesn't work that way. Some Christians are going to have, all Christians have their sins forgiven, but some of them are going to have more rewards than others. So that's just something to keep in mind when we're talking about the judgment seat of Christ. Okay, you're not going to fail out so bad at being a Christian that you might lose all your rewards, but you're not going to just get downgraded to go to hell. That's not something that you have to worry about. I just want to put that out there. People worry about this, and I understand. I can totally understand why people worry about it. I don't want you to worry about that. I do want you to be concerned about earning as many of those rewards as possible. So, no foundation can anyone lay than that which is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So your foundation is the gospel, okay? You believe in Jesus, that's your foundation, you're good. You're not going to lose your foundation. He's the foundation. He's the reason you're getting into heaven. So take a deep breath. Whew. Okay. Verse 12. Now, if anyone builds on this foundation, this is talking about those good works that we do, what we're doing to earn our rewards. If anyone builds on this foundation with gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, straw, each one's work will become clear, for the day will declare it, because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test each one's work of what sort it is. So I think of it kind of like this. This is just the visual I have in my head. I'm sure it won't be like this, but I just imagine they take some kind of physical representation of our good works and they put it on like this conveyor belt type of thing, okay? And it takes all of our good works that we did and it runs them on the conveyor belt. It runs them through like a furnace type of thing. And it comes out the other side and we see what happened to those rewards. Because it's going to say this in verse 14. If anyone's work which he has built on it endures, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burned, he will suffer loss, but he himself will be saved, yet so as through fire. Okay, so some of the works when they get through this conveyor belt system or whatever, again, this is just how I visualize it. Those works, some of them are going to be burned away. Some of them are going to evaporate away. They're not going to withstand the fire. I think that's what it means when it's talking about some of our works that we think were good, solid works. Well, they were wood, hay, and straw. They're just going to burn up. And some of the works we did are gold, and they're going to pass right through the fire and come out the other side without being damaged all that much at all. So those are the ones that'll endure, and that's what we're actually going to be rewarded for, okay? So here's how I think about it, is like our works are tested, all right? And he's going to say to you, he's going to say, hey, you were always faithful with attending church, and you were always paying attention. You were a great tither. You were so generous with your money. You were a great worker at every position that you held. You made your bosses so proud of you. They knew you were a Christian. You made a great example for me. You were such a great student in school. You impressed all your teachers. And so you get rewards for those things. Now, meanwhile, maybe they come to someone and say, hey, you were a wonderful missionary. You told people the gospel. You got 14 people saved over in that other country. And then he might turn to you and he's going to say, hey, and you gave $10 to that missionary every month to help them get over there and get those people saved. So part of the reward that missionary earned, part of that's going to go to you as well. And he's like, hey, you gave that missionary $50 to help get them there. You get a reward for what was accomplished that they did. Okay, see how all this works together. So these are ways that we accumulate rewards. Jesus will get around to some people. He's going to say, hey, yeah, I saved your soul, but you really didn't do much for me at all. Like, you became a Christian, you didn't do anything with it. And all your work, all the stuff you did, you just spent all your time playing video games and watching Wheel of Fortune. And it's just, you wasted so much time, and it's all burned up. I don't know why I'm being so hard on Wheel of Fortune tonight. But you know what? What we do with our time matters. It's going to matter for all of eternity, okay? So this work and its associated rewards, sometimes it's not going to make it through the test of the furnace whenever we get to the judgment seat of Christ. You're still saved. What did that last verse say? He himself will be saved, yet as though through fire. It's going to be like, woo, okay. He got through the test, but it's like he smells a little scorched, like he just barely made it through the test. He's going to heaven, but he doesn't have much to show for it, okay? And I don't want you to be in that state. So some of the things that we do trying to earn these rewards, they are not going to count. And you say, well, like what? What's not going to count? We're going to talk about that next week. So thank you for listening to the Cross References Bible Study. This has been Luke Taylor, and I hope the Bible makes more sense to you after this episode.